What if the meal that made a billionaire stop breathing was cooked by the one person his family was never meant to find? "Get her out of here! Now!" The manager's voice cracked through the restaurant, sharp enough to silence every table. Rachel Monroe froze. Flour still dusted across her hands, her apron stained from hours in the kitchen. She hadn't even meant to step into the dining room. "I'm sorry," she whispered. A few guests laughed. One woman leaned back in her chair. "You let her cook our food?" But across the room, the man who had taken a single bite of her dish hadn't moved. His hand tightened around the spoon. His face had gone pale. Because the taste. It wasn't just familiar. It was impossible. Slowly, his eyes lifted, locking onto Rachel like he was staring at a ghost from a life he thought was buried forever. And then, she noticed it. The ring on his finger. Her breath caught as her hand instinctively rose to the pendant around her neck, bearing the same symbol. The room fell silent, because something was very, very wrong. Before we go on, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there, and don't forget to subscribe, because this story might change the way you see people forever. The city of Chicago never really slept, but there were parts of it that felt forgotten. Tucked between a flickering laundromat sign and a boarded-up bookstore sat a narrow restaurant called Mason's Table. From the outside, it didn't look like much. The paint on the windows was chipped, the sign buzzed unevenly, and the door creaked every time it opened. But inside, there was warmth. Not the kind money could buy, but the kind that lingered in the air. The scent of slow-cooked broth, roasted herbs, and something deeper, something comforting, wrapped around every guest who stepped inside. Most people didn't come for the decor. They came for one thing: the soup. No one could quite explain it. Some said it reminded them of childhood. Others said it felt like home. A few claimed it tasted like something they had once lost. But no one knew exactly why. And almost no one knew who made it. Behind the kitchen doors, far from the soft glow of the dining area, Rachel Monroe stood over a simmering pot, her movements steady and precise. Steam rose around her, catching in the loose strands of her dark hair that had escaped her bun. Her hands moved with quiet confidence, even as exhaustion pulled at her shoulders. She didn't rush. She never did. Because for Rachel, cooking wasn't just work. It was survival. A timer beeped somewhere behind her, and one of the younger cooks scrambled to turn it off before it could draw attention. "Careful," Rachel said gently, not looking up. "Too much heat, and you lose the balance." The young cook nodded quickly. "Yes, Rachel." Rachel tasted the broth, her expression thoughtful. Then, with the slightest adjustment, a pinch of seasoning, a slow stir, she nodded. "Now it's right." No applause followed, no recognition, because out there, beyond the swinging doors, no one ever asked who made the food. And inside the kitchen, Rachel was just another employee. Or at least, that's how Derek Holloway liked it. "Monroe!" The sharp voice cut through the kitchen like a blade. Rachel closed her eyes for a brief second before turning. Derek Holloway stood in the doorway, arms crossed, his expression already tight with irritation. His suit was too expensive for a place like this, his watch gleaming under the harsh kitchen lights. "Table 7 is asking questions," he said, "and I don't like questions." Rachel wiped her hands on her apron. "About the soup?" "Of course about the soup," Derek snapped. "It's always about the soup." He stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough to make it feel more threatening. "You stay back here. Understood?" Rachel met his gaze calmly. "I always do." Derek studied her for a moment, as if trying to find something to criticize. When he didn't, his lips pressed into a thin line. "Good," he muttered. "Let's keep it that way." He turned and walked out without another word. The kitchen fell quiet again, but the tension lingered. One of the cooks leaned closer to Rachel. "Why does he hate you so much?" Rachel didn't answer right away. She picked up a ladle, slowly stirring the pot again, watching the surface ripple. "Some people," she said softly, "don't like being reminded where the real value comes from." The cook frowned, not fully understanding. Rachel didn't explain, because explaining wouldn't change anything. Not the long hours, not the quiet sacrifices, not the fact that no matter how many people came through those doors for her food, her name would never be on the menu. And yet, she stayed. Because of one reason. "Mom?" The small voice came from the back hallway. Rachel's face softened instantly. Sophie Monroe stood there, clutching a worn backpack, her wide eyes scanning the busy kitchen. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old, her hair tied in a slightly uneven ponytail. Rachel's exhaustion melted away. "Hey, sweetheart," she said, kneeling down. "You're early." Sophie shrugged. "School ended early. I waited outside." Rachel's smile faltered for just a second. "You should have come in sooner." "I didn't want to get you in trouble." Rachel pulled her into a hug, holding her just a little tighter than usual. "You could never do that," she whispered. Sophie leaned back, looking up at her. "Did you make the soup today?" Rachel smiled faintly. "Every day." Sophie grinned. "Then it's going to be a good day." Rachel wished she believed that. Across the city, far from the quiet warmth of Mason's table, another world existed entirely. Glass towers, private elevators, silent drivers waiting by black cars. At the center of it all stood Khalid al-Najjar. He didn't belong to places like Mason's table. He owned things far bigger. Entire hotel chains, real estate stretching across continents, investments that shaped industries most people would never even understand. But none of that brought him peace. At 39, Khalid had everything. And yet, there were nights when he couldn't sleep. Nights when a memory lingered just out of reach. A taste. A scent. Something he couldn't quite name, but couldn't forget either. "Your schedule, sir." His assistant placed a tablet in front of him. Khalid barely glanced at it. Meetings, calls, contracts. Endless. Meaningless. "Cancel the afternoon," he said quietly. The assistant hesitated. "Sir, the board—" "Cancel it." There was something in his tone that made further argument impossible. "Yes, sir." A few minutes later, Khalid stood alone by the window, looking out over the city. Then, without another word, he walked away from it all. No suit, no driver, no security, just a simple coat, and a destination he couldn't explain. Because somewhere in this city, something was waiting for him. Something tied to a memory he had spent years trying to bury. And for the first time in a long time, he wasn't running from it. Back at the restaurant, Rachel handed Sophie a small bowl of soup. "Careful, it's hot." Sophie blew on it before taking a sip. Her eyes lit up instantly. "It tastes like home," she said. Rachel froze. For a moment, just a moment, something flickered across her face. A memory, a voice, a warning she had never forgotten. Her mother's voice. "One day someone will come looking for this recipe, and when they do, you have to be careful." Rachel shook the thought away. That was a long time ago. Different life, different world, And people like that didn't come to places like this, right? Outside, the restaurant door creaked open. A man stepped in quietly, unnoticed by most. But something about the air shifted, because in that moment, two worlds had just collided, and neither of them knew. Everything was about to change. The bell above the door gave a soft, uneven chime as the man stepped inside. No one turned right away. At Mason's table, people didn't expect anything unusual. It was the kind of place where strangers came and went quietly, where stories stayed tucked behind tired eyes and warm plates of food. But something shifted anyway. It was subtle. The way the air seemed to still for a fraction of a second. The way a few conversations slowed, as if something unseen had passed through the room. Khalid al-Najjar stood just inside the entrance, his gaze sweeping the restaurant with calm precision. Nothing about him demanded attention. His coat was simple, his posture relaxed, his expression unreadable. And yet, there was a quiet weight to him, the kind that didn't need to announce itself. A hostess approached, offering a polite smile. "Table for one?" Khalid nodded once. She led him to a small table near the corner, far enough from the center to avoid attention, but close enough to observe everything. Khalid sat without a word, his eyes drifting across the room. Families leaned over shared plates. Couples spoke in hushed tones. A group of friends laughed too loudly in the back. It was ordinary, comforting, foreign. He picked up the menu, scanning it quickly. His gaze stopped on one item. House special soup. No description. No ingredients listed. Just a name. His fingers tightened slightly against the edge of the menu. Something about it felt deliberate. "Can I get you started?" the waitress asked. Khalid didn't look up. "The soup," she nodded. "That's our most popular." "I know." His voice was calm, but final. The waitress hesitated for a moment, then stepped away. From across the room, Derek Holloway had already noticed him. Derek didn't like surprises. And he definitely didn't like customers who spoke like they were used to being obeyed. He watched Khalid for a few seconds longer than necessary, his eyes narrowing slightly. Then he turned his attention back to the floor. For now. Behind the kitchen doors, Rachel was finishing another batch. The rhythm of her work steadied her. Measure. Taste. Adjust. Repeat. She didn't need to think about it anymore. Her hands remembered what her mind didn't always allow itself to revisit. "Order up! Special soup!" one of the servers called. Rachel nodded and carefully ladled the broth into a clean bowl. Steam curled upward, carrying that same quiet, impossible warmth. She paused for just a second, then handed it off. "Be careful," she said. "Don't spill it." The server smiled. "I never do." Rachel watched the bowl disappear through the swinging doors. Something about that moment lingered. She couldn't explain it. She just felt it. Out in the dining room, the bowl was placed gently in front of Khalid. "Your soup." He didn't respond right away. For a moment, he simply looked at it. The color. The texture. The way the steam rose in slow, deliberate spirals. His chest tightened. It wasn't possible. And yet, his hand moved almost on its own. He picked up the spoon, brought it closer, paused. Then, he took a single bite. The world didn't explode. There was no dramatic sound, no visible reaction. But inside, everything shifted. The taste hit him like a memory he had never truly let go of. Warm, layered, precise. But beneath it all, something deeper, something personal. His hand froze mid-air. His breathing slowed. And for the first time in years, Khalid al-Najjar didn't see the restaurant. He saw a small kitchen, sunlight through a narrow window. A woman standing over a pot, smiling softly as she stirred. "Not too fast," she used to say. "You'll ruin it if you rush." His mother. The memory hit so suddenly that it left him almost disoriented. Because this was her recipe, or at least, it shouldn't exist anywhere else. Khalid slowly lowered the spoon. The room around him continued as if nothing had changed. But for him, nothing was the same. He looked up. "Who made this?" The question was quiet, but something about it cut through the noise. The waitress blinked. "Excuse me?" "The soup," Khalid said, his voice steady now. "Who made it?" She hesitated. "It's our kitchen." Khalid's gaze sharpened slightly. "That's not what I asked." Across the room, Derek had already started moving. He stepped in before the waitress could answer. "Is there a problem, sir?" Derek asked, his tone polite but edged with control. Khalid turned his attention to him. "Yes." Derek's smile tightened. "I'm sure we can fix. I want to meet the person who made this." The words landed heavier than expected. Derek's expression didn't change immediately, but something flickered behind his eyes. "No one meets the kitchen staff," he said smoothly. "It's company policy." Khalid didn't blink. "Then change it." A few nearby tables went quiet. Derek let out a short, controlled breath. "I'm afraid that's not how this works." Khalid leaned back slightly in his chair. "For you," he said calmly. "Maybe not." The tension between them thickened. Derek studied him more carefully now. There was something about this man that didn't fit. Not his clothes, not his presence, not the way he spoke. "Sir," Derek said, lowering his voice, "our staff is busy. If you have feedback, I can pass it along." Khalid shook his head once. "I don't give feedback." He placed the spoon down with quiet precision. "I ask questions." The room felt different now. Quieter, more aware. Derek's patience was wearing thin, but something told him pushing too hard would be a mistake. "Fine," he said after a moment. "I'll see what I can do." He turned and walked toward the kitchen. Inside, Rachel was already preparing another order when Derek burst through the doors. "Monroe!" She didn't look up. "Yes?" "You're needed out front." That made her pause. Rachel turned slowly. "Why?" Derek's smile didn't reach his eyes. "A customer wants to meet you." Rachel frowned. "That doesn't happen." "It does today." Something in his tone made her uneasy. "I'm in the middle of—" "Drop it!" The words snapped through the room. The kitchen fell silent. Rachel glanced at the other cooks. No one moved. No one spoke. She wiped her hands slowly on her apron. "Fine." Derek stepped aside, gesturing toward the door. "Don't take too long." Rachel took a breath, then pushed through the swinging doors. The dining room felt brighter than she remembered. Louder, exposed. Dozens of eyes turned toward her almost instantly, some curious, some amused, some already judging. Rachel kept her gaze low as she stepped forward. Until she saw him, the man from the corner table. He was already watching her, not with impatience, not with anger, but with something else, something she couldn't name. And then her eyes dropped to his hand. The ring. Her breath caught. The symbol carved into the metal was unmistakable. She had seen it before. Not here. Not in this life. Her fingers moved before she could stop them, rising slowly to her chest, gripping the small pendant that rested against her skin. The same symbol. The same mark. Khalid noticed. His gaze sharpened instantly. The space between them seemed to collapse. Neither spoke. Neither moved. But in that silent moment, something passed between them. Something old. Something unfinished. And something dangerously close to the truth. Because whatever connection tied them together, it was never meant to resurface. So why? Had it? For a moment, no one spoke. Rachel stood in the middle of the dining room, her hand still resting against the pendant at her chest. The faint clink of dishes and distant conversations seemed to fade, swallowed by the tension that had suddenly taken over the space. Khalid didn't look away. Neither did she. But the silence didn't last. "Well," a voice cut in sharply, breaking the fragile moment. "This is exactly why standards are slipping." Heads turned. Vanessa Clark leaned back in her chair, one perfectly manicured hand resting on the edge of her wine glass. Her eyes moved slowly over Rachel, from the worn apron to the flour on her hands, with thinly veiled disgust. "This is the person cooking for us?" Vanessa continued, loud enough for half the room to hear. "You've got to be kidding." A few of her friends snickered. Rachel lowered her hand, her posture straightening slightly. She didn't respond. She never did, because responding usually made things worse. Derek stepped forward immediately, his tone shifting into something smoother, more controlled. "I apologize, Ms. Clark," he said, offering a tight smile. "There's been a misunderstanding." He turned to Rachel, his expression sharpening. "Go back to the kitchen," he said under his breath. But Khalid spoke before she could move. "She stays." The words were quiet, but they carried. Derek froze. Vanessa raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" Khalid leaned forward slightly, his gaze still fixed on Rachel. "I asked to meet the person who made the food," he said calmly. "I'm still waiting." The room fell into a different kind of silence. This wasn't curiosity anymore. This was tension. Derek forced a chuckle. "Of course, sir. But I assure you there's nothing to—" "There is," Khalid interrupted. He picked up the spoon again, letting it rest against the edge of the bowl. "This doesn't happen by accident." Vanessa let out a short laugh. "It's soup." Khalid turned his head slowly, his expression unreadable. "No," he said. "It's not." Something in his tone made her smile falter. Just slightly, but she recovered quickly. "Well, whatever it is," she said, waving her hand dismissively, "I'd prefer someone more presentable handling my food." The implication hung in the air. Rachel felt it land, hard. But she didn't react. Not outwardly. Inside, though, she felt the familiar tightening in her chest. The quiet reminder that no matter how hard she worked, no matter how good she was, there would always be people who saw her the same way. Less than. Derek seized the moment. "I completely understand," he said quickly. "We can have another chef prepare your meal immediately." Rachel's head turned slightly toward him. Another chef? There wasn't another chef. Not for that dish. But Derek didn't care about that. He cared about appearances, about keeping customers like Vanessa happy, even if it meant erasing Rachel entirely. "She won't be making your food again," Derek added, his voice low but firm. Rachel swallowed. Still, she said nothing, because speaking up here wouldn't help. Khalid's gaze shifted between them. He saw it. All of it. The dismissal. The control. The way Rachel was being pushed out of her own work. "Why?" he asked suddenly. Derek blinked. "I'm sorry? Why won't she make it again?" Khalid repeated. Derek hesitated. "It's a matter of customer preference." Khalid nodded slowly. "I see." He leaned back in his chair, his fingers resting lightly against the table. "And what about her preference?" Derek frowned. Rachel spoke before he could finish. "It's fine," she said quietly. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through everything. "I'll go back," she added. Derek nodded immediately. "Good." Rachel turned. One step. Two. But then... "Wait." Khalid's voice stopped her again. She didn't turn right away. Something about the way he said it made her hesitate. Slowly, she looked back. Khalid studied her face carefully now. Not her clothes. Not her hands. Her face. As if he were searching for something deeper. "You didn't answer me," he said. Rachel blinked. "About what?" "The food," Khalid said. "How did you learn to make it?" Derek stepped in quickly. "Sir, that's not relevant." "It is to me." Derek's jaw tightened. Rachel hesitated. She could feel everyone watching now. Waiting. Judging. "It's just a recipe," she said softly. Khalid shook his head. "No," he said. "It isn't." The certainty in his voice unsettled her, because part of her, a small, buried part, agreed. "It was my mother's," Rachel added after a moment. The words slipped out before she could stop them. Derek's eyes narrowed. "You don't need to..." But Khalid leaned forward slightly. "Your mother taught you?" Rachel nodded slowly. "Yes." Khalid's fingers curled slightly against the table. "How long ago?" Rachel frowned, unsure why the question mattered. "A long time," she said. "Before she passed." Something shifted in Khalid's expression. Not visible to everyone. But Rachel saw it. A flicker. A crack. Derek stepped forward again, his patience gone. "That's enough," he said sharply. "Back to the kitchen. Now." Rachel didn't argue. She turned again, but this time, the room didn't feel the same. The laughter, the whispers, the judgment. It all pressed in heavier than before. As she walked past Vanessa's table, she heard it. "Unbelievable," Vanessa muttered. "They'll let anyone cook these days." Rachel kept walking. Didn't slow down. Didn't react. Because if she stopped, she might break. Behind her, Khalid's gaze darkened. He watched Rachel disappear through the kitchen doors. Watched the way she carried herself. Not defeated. Not weak. But tired. And something about that stayed with him. Derek let out a breath and turned back to Khalid with a practiced smile. "My apologies for the disruption, sir. We'll have another dish prepared for you right away." Khalid didn't respond. His eyes remained fixed on the kitchen doors. "No," he said after a moment. Derek blinked. "No? I'll finish this." He picked up the spoon again, took another bite. And once again, that same impossible taste filled his senses. But this time, it wasn't just memory. It was something else. Something closer. Something real. Derek forced a polite nod and stepped away, but his expression had changed. Because now, he was paying attention. And what he saw, he didn't like. Inside the kitchen, Rachel leaned against the counter, her hands gripping the edge tightly. Her breathing was uneven. Not from the work, but from everything else. "Are you okay?" one of the cooks asked quietly. Rachel nodded, even though she wasn't. "I'm fine." But her mind wasn't in the kitchen anymore. It was out there, at that table, with that man, and the way he had looked at her, like he knew something, like he recognized something, like he wasn't going to let this go. Rachel closed her eyes for a brief second. Her mother's voice echoed again in her memory. "If they ever come looking, be careful who you trust." Rachel opened her eyes, because something told her this wasn't over, not even close, and whatever was about to happen next, she might not be ready for it. The dinner rush came and went, like a storm that had already decided its course. Plates clattered, orders were called, and voices rose and fell in a rhythm Rachel had long ago learned to follow, without thinking. By the time the last table cleared, the kitchen air had turned heavy with heat and exhaustion. Rachel moved slower now. Not careless, never careless, but measured. Her shoulders ached, her fingers stung from hours of heat and steam, but she kept going until the final pot was washed and the burners clicked off one by one. Derek had already left. Of course he had. He never stayed for cleanup. The others trickled out not long after, murmuring goodnights, too tired to linger. One of the younger cooks offered Rachel a small wave before slipping out the back door. "See you tomorrow." Rachel nodded. "Get home safe." When the door closed behind him, the kitchen fell into a rare kind of silence. No orders, no shouting, no pressure. Just the low hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of cooling metal. Rachel exhaled slowly. For a moment, she allowed herself to lean against the counter, closing her eyes. But she didn't stay there long. She never did. Because there was always something else waiting. In the small locker room at the back, Sophie sat on a bench, her backpack tucked neatly beside her. She had fallen asleep at some point, her head resting against the wall, her small hands curled loosely in her lap. Rachel's expression softened instantly. She stepped closer, brushing a stray strand of hair away from Sophie's face. "Hey," she whispered gently. Sophie stirred, blinking up at her. "Is it time to go?" Rachel smiled faintly. "Yeah, sweetheart. Let's head home." Sophie nodded, rubbing her eyes before sliding off the bench. She reached for Rachel's hand without hesitation, her fingers small but steady. Outside, the night air was cooler. The city had quieted just enough to feel different. Streetlights cast long shadows across the sidewalk as Rachel and Sophie stepped into the alley behind the restaurant. It wasn't the safest route, but it was the shortest. And when you were tired, shortcuts mattered. They had only walked a few steps when Sophie tugged lightly on Rachel's hand. "Mom? Yeah? Can we bring him some food tonight?" Rachel followed her gaze. At the far end of the alley, near a stack of discarded crates, a figure sat slumped against the wall. Mr. Leonard Hayes. Rachel hesitated for a moment. She was tired, her feet hurt, and the last thing she wanted was to go back inside. But then she looked down at Sophie and saw the quiet expectation in her eyes. Rachel exhaled softly. "Okay," she said. "Wait here." Sophie nodded eagerly. Rachel slipped back through the back door, moving quickly now. She grabbed a container, ladled what was left of the soup into it, and added a piece of bread from the day's unsold batch. It wasn't much, but it was warm, and sometimes that was enough. When she returned, Leonard hadn't moved. His head was lowered, his shoulders hunched against the cold. Rachel approached slowly, careful not to startle him. "Mr. Hayes," she said gently. He stirred, lifting his head just enough to see her. Recognition flickered in his tired eyes. "You again," he murmured. Rachel offered a small smile. "We had some extra." She held out the container. Leonard stared at it for a moment, not reaching for it right away, as if he didn't quite believe it was real. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. Rachel shrugged. "I know." Sophie stepped forward then, her voice bright despite the hour. "But we wanted to." Leonard's gaze shifted to her. Something softened in his expression. After a moment, he reached out, his hands trembling slightly as he took the food. "Thank you," he said. Rachel nodded. "It's still hot. Be careful." Leonard gave a faint chuckle. Hot food's a luxury these days. He opened the container slowly. Steam rose into the cool night air. And then he froze. His fingers tightened slightly around the edge. Rachel noticed. "Is something wrong?" she asked. Leonard didn't answer right away. Instead, he brought the spoon to his mouth, took a careful bite, and then his eyes widened, not in surprise, but in recognition. "That's," he whispered. Rachel's brow furrowed. "What?" Leonard lowered the spoon, his gaze lifting to meet hers fully now. "Where did you learn to make this?" Rachel hesitated. The question again. It had followed her all day. "It's just something my mom taught me," she said. Leonard's expression changed. Subtly. But enough. "Your mother," he repeated slowly. Rachel nodded. "She passed a long time ago." Leonard looked back at the container, then back at Rachel, his eyes searching, as if trying to confirm something he wasn't ready to say out loud. Sophie shifted beside her. "Is it good?" Leonard let out a quiet breath. "Good?" he said softly. "It's more than good." He looked at Rachel again. "You ever wonder where your mother learned it?" Rachel's stomach tightened slightly. "No," she said. "She never talked about it." Leonard nodded slowly. "Some people don't," he murmured. Silence settled between them. Heavy. Unfinished. Rachel felt it. That same unease from earlier. The same sense that something was just beneath the surface. Waiting. "Why?" she asked carefully. "Do you know something?" Leonard opened his mouth, then stopped. His gaze shifted past her, over her shoulder. Rachel turned instinctively. At the entrance of the alley, partially hidden in shadow, someone stood watching. Khalid. He hadn't meant to follow them. At least that's what he told himself. But after leaving the restaurant, something had pulled him back. Something he couldn't ignore. And now, he stood there, silent, observing. Rachel helping someone who had nothing. No cameras, no audience, no expectation of reward. Just kindness, unfiltered, uncalculated, real. Leonard noticed him too, and for the first time since Rachel had arrived. His expression shifted into something sharper, something knowing. "You've got company," Leonard said quietly. Rachel turned back again, her breath catching slightly as she recognized him. The man from the restaurant. Standing there, still watching, still searching. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Leonard did, his voice lower now, measured. "You might want to be careful," he said, his eyes still on Khalid. Rachel frowned. "About what?" Leonard's gaze flickered between them, then settled. "Some people don't go looking for things, unless they're ready to find something they can't walk away from." The words hung in the air, heavy. Khalid didn't move. Rachel didn't understand. Not fully. But she felt it. That shift. That moment where something simple had just become complicated. Dangerously so. Because whatever connection had started inside that restaurant, it wasn't fading. It was growing. And now, it had witnesses. The question was no longer if something would happen next. It was, what? The alley felt narrower now, like the walls had shifted closer together, pressing the air tight between them. Rachel stood beside Sophie, her hand instinctively tightening around her daughter's fingers. Across from them, Leonard Hayes remained seated, the container of soup still in his lap, steam fading into the night. And at the entrance, Khalid al-Najjar. Watching. Waiting. Rachel was the first to speak. "You followed us," she said, her voice steady but guarded. Khalid didn't deny it. "I wanted to understand," he replied. "Understand what?" Rachel asked. He stepped forward slightly, just enough for the streetlight to catch his face. "The food," he said. "You." Rachel let out a quiet breath. "That's not something you just follow someone into an alley for." Khalid's gaze didn't waver. "Sometimes it is." Sophie shifted beside her, peeking around Rachel's arm. "Mom, that's the man from inside." "I know," Rachel said softly. Leonard watched the exchange closely, his expression unreadable now, his earlier hesitation replaced with something more deliberate. "You're not here by accident," Leonard said to Khalid. Khalid's attention moved to him. "No," he admitted. Leonard nodded slowly, as if confirming something to himself. "Didn't think so?" Rachel frowned. "Do you two know each other?" "Not directly," Leonard answered, before Khalid could speak. "But I know the kind of man he is." Khalid's jaw tightened slightly. "And what kind is that?" Leonard leaned back against the wall, his voice quiet, but firm. "The kind who's been looking for something he lost a long time ago, without even knowing where to start." Silence followed. Khalid didn't respond, but the truth in the words landed. Rachel felt it too, even if she didn't fully understand why. "I think we should go," she said, turning slightly toward Sophie. "Wait." Khalid's voice stopped her again. Rachel hesitated, then faced him. "What?" Khalid took another step closer, but not too close. He kept his distance, as if aware that pushing too far might break whatever fragile connection had formed. "The recipe," he said. "Your mother, what was her name?" Rachel's expression hardened slightly. "Why does that matter?" "Because it does," Khalid said, more firmly now. Rachel studied him for a long moment. Then, "Evelyn Monroe." The name hung in the air. Leonard's eyes flickered. Khalid's breath slowed. Because that name. It wasn't unfamiliar. Not entirely. "Evelyn," he repeated quietly. Leonard watched him closely. "That ring you're wearing," he said suddenly. "Where'd you get it?" Khalid looked down briefly at his hand. "It belonged to my mother." Leonard gave a small, almost humorless laugh. "Of course it did." Rachel's heart skipped. "What is going on?" she asked, her voice tightening. Leonard didn't answer right away. Instead, he shifted slightly, setting the empty container beside him. "I used to work in a place not too far from here," he began slowly. "Years ago. Different life." Rachel listened, unsure whether she should. "It was a private estate," Leonard continued. "Big, quiet. The kind of place most people never even see from the outside." Khalid didn't interrupt. Something in his posture had changed. More alert now. More focused. "There was a woman there," Leonard said. "Kind. Patient. She spent more time in the kitchen than anywhere else." Rachel felt her pulse quicken. "My mother?" she asked softly. Leonard shook his head. No, he said. Not yours. Rachel's breath caught. Then who? Leonard's gaze moved to Khalid. His. The word landed like a weight. Khalid's expression didn't change outwardly, but something shifted beneath the surface. My mother never worked here, he said. No, Leonard agreed. She didn't. He leaned forward slightly. But she knew someone who did. Rachel's mind raced. None of this made sense. Are you saying, she began, but couldn't finish. Leonard nodded once. Your mother didn't come up with that recipe on her own. Rachel felt something twist in her chest. That's not possible, she said. She taught me everything she knew. And someone taught her, Leonard replied calmly. Khalid's eyes narrowed slightly. Who? Leonard held his gaze. The woman who wore that ring. Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. Rachel's hand moved unconsciously to her pendant again, her fingers curling around it. But why? She asked. Why would she teach my mom? Leonard hesitated. For the first time since the conversation began, uncertainty flickered across his face. Because she wanted to help, he said. Khalid's voice cut in. My mother helped people, he said. But she didn't leave things unfinished. Leonard let out a slow breath. That depends on who you ask. The implication was clear. Rachel felt it. So something happened, she said. Something that stopped it. Leonard nodded slowly. Yes. What? Rachel pressed. Leonard's gaze dropped for a moment, then lifted again. I don't know everything, he admitted. But I know this. There was money involved. A transfer. Something meant to go to your family. Rachel's stomach tightened. What are you saying? That your mother was supposed to get help, Leonard said. More than just a recipe. Khalid's expression darkened. That never happened, he said. No, Leonard agreed. It didn't. Rachel's voice was barely above a whisper now. Why? Leonard looked between them, then finally said it. Because someone made sure it didn't. The words lingered, cold, sharp, unanswered. Rachel's thoughts spiraled. Her mother had struggled, worked multiple jobs, done everything she could just to survive. If help had been promised, why hadn't it come? Khalid's jaw clenched. There would have been records, he said. Documentation. Leonard gave a small nod. There probably was. Then where is it? Leonard's eyes hardened slightly. That's the right question. A distant sound echoed from the street beyond the alley. A car passing. A door closing somewhere far off. The world moving on. Unaware of what was unfolding here, Rachel looked at Khalid again. Really looked at him this time. You said you wanted to understand, she said quietly. I do. Then start there, she said. Because if what he's saying is true... She swallowed. Then something was taken from my family. Khalid held her gaze. And from mine, he added. The connection between them shifted again. No longer just curiosity. No longer just coincidence. Now, it was something else. Something heavier. Because whatever had happened in the past, it hadn't disappeared. It had been buried. And now, it was starting to surface. The question was no longer whether they were connected. It was, who had kept them apart? By the next morning, Mason's table looked exactly the same. The same flickering sign, the same narrow windows, the same quiet promise of something warm waiting inside. But for Rachel Monroe, everything felt different. She hadn't slept much, not after the alley. Not after Leonard's words, and definitely not after the way Khalid had looked at her, like she wasn't just a stranger anymore, like she was part of something unfinished. Rachel tied her apron slowly, her fingers moving on instinct, while her mind replayed everything from the night before. Money that never came. A connection that shouldn't exist. A past that had been hidden. "Monroe!" Derek's voice snapped her out of it. She turned. He stood near the office door, already watching her, too closely. "Office," he said. Rachel frowned. "I just got in. Now." The word wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. Rachel wiped her hands and walked toward him, her stomach tightening slightly. Something felt off, more than usual. Inside the office, the air was stale. Derek closed the door behind her. Didn't offer her a seat. Didn't pretend this was a normal conversation. "Something came up last night," he said. Rachel crossed her arms lightly. "What kind of something?" Derek didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked to the desk and opened a drawer, pulled something out, and placed it down. Cash. A thick stack. Rachel's eyes narrowed. "What is that?" Derek leaned against the desk, watching her reaction. "Funny thing," he said. "Money doesn't just disappear." Rachel felt her pulse spike. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" Derek replied calmly. Rachel shook her head. "No." Derek picked up the stack and tapped it lightly against the desk. "This was taken from the register last night." Rachel's breath caught. "That's not possible." "Isn't it?" "No," she said firmly. "I closed the kitchen. I didn't go near the register." Derek's lips curved slightly. "That's not what it looks like." Rachel's chest tightened. "What does that mean?" Derek pushed off the desk and stepped closer. "It means," he said quietly, "that I have a problem." Rachel didn't move. "And I don't like problems," Derek added. "Then maybe you should find out what actually happened," she said, her voice steady despite the tension rising in her chest. Derek smiled. "Oh, I did." He walked past her, opened the door. "Everyone," he called out into the kitchen. "Come here for a second." Rachel turned slowly. "No," she said under her breath. But it was already happening. The staff gathered, confused, uneasy, watching. Derek stepped back into the office doorway, gesturing for Rachel to follow. "Go on," he said. Rachel stepped out into the open space, feeling the weight of every eye on her. "What's going on?" one of the cooks asked. Derek didn't answer him. Instead, he held up the money. "This," he said, "was found missing this morning." Murmurs spread. Rachel's heart pounded. "I didn't take it," she said immediately. Derek nodded slowly. "That's what you're going to say, isn't it? Because it's true." Derek tilted his head slightly. "Then you won't mind if we check?" Rachel blinked. "Check what?" "Your things." The room went quiet. Rachel felt the ground shift beneath her. "That's not necessary," she said. Derek's expression hardened. "It is if you want to keep your job." Rachel's hands clenched slightly at her sides. She looked around. No one spoke. No one stepped in. Because they were afraid. Because Derek controlled everything here. Rachel swallowed. "Fine," she said quietly. Derek smiled again. "Good." He nodded toward her locker. "Go ahead." Rachel walked slowly toward the back, each step heavier than the last. This wasn't right. It didn't make sense. But somehow, it was happening anyway. She opened her locker, reached inside, pulled out her bag, turned back. Derek stepped forward, taking it from her before she could react. "Let's see," he said. Rachel's heart raced. This is ridiculous, she said. Derek ignored her. He unzipped the bag, reached inside, and then stopped. For a fraction of a second. But Rachel saw it. That flicker. That hesitation. Then he pulled it out. The money. The same stack. The room exploded into whispers. No, Rachel breathed. Her mind went blank. That's not mine, she said, louder now. I didn't put that there. Derek held it up. It was in your bag, he said. That doesn't mean... It means exactly what it looks like. Rachel shook her head, panic rising. No, someone put it there. Who? Derek asked. Rachel opened her mouth, but no answer came. Because how could she prove it? How could she explain something she didn't even understand herself? I didn't do this, she said again, her voice breaking slightly now. Derek's tone turned cold. You expect me to believe that? Yes, she said. He laughed, short, dismissive. I don't. Rachel felt the room closing in, the whispers growing louder, judgment settling in. Sophie. The thought hit her suddenly. She turned toward the back hallway, and there she was, standing in the doorway, watching, her small face pale. Mom? Sophie whispered. Rachel's heart broke. It's okay, she said quickly. It's a mistake. But it didn't feel like one. It felt planned, deliberate, precise. Derek looked at the child, then back at Rachel. This isn't a place for thieves, he said. Rachel stepped forward. I'm not a thief. Derek's expression didn't change. Then prove it. Rachel's hands trembled. How? Derek shrugged. That's your problem. The silence that followed was suffocating. Until a voice cut through it. Actually, it said calmly, it's yours. Everyone turned. Khalid stood in the doorway. His presence shifted the room instantly. Not loud, not aggressive, but undeniable. Derek's eyes narrowed. This is a private matter, he said. Khalid didn't move. No, he replied. It's not. He stepped inside slowly, his gaze moving from the money, to Rachel, to Derek. I'd like to see the security footage. Derek's jaw tightened. There isn't any. Khalid's eyes sharpened. There's always footage. Not this time, Derek said quickly. Khalid studied him for a long moment. Then we'll find another way, he said. The calm certainty in his voice sent a ripple through the room, because suddenly, this wasn't just an accusation anymore. It was something else, something bigger. Rachel looked at him, her breath unsteady. Why was he helping her? Why did he care? And more importantly, what was he about to uncover? The kitchen didn't sound the same anymore. It wasn't the clatter of pots or the hiss of burners that filled the space. It was silence. Heavy. Watching. Waiting. Rachel stood frozen, her hands trembling slightly at her sides, as Derek still held the stack of cash like proof of something already decided. Across from her, Khalid al-Najjar didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Then we'll find another way, he had said. And somehow, that had changed everything. Derek let out a short, controlled laugh, trying to regain ground. You're still here? He said. I thought you finished your meal. Khalid didn't look at him immediately. His attention remained on Rachel for a brief moment longer, as if measuring something unspoken. Then he shifted his gaze. I did, Khalid said calmly. But I'm not finished with this. Derek's smile tightened. Like I said, it's a private matter. No, Khalid repeated, quieter this time. It's not. The room seemed to lean toward him. Derek took a step forward. You don't have any authority here. Khalid tilted his head slightly. That's where you're mistaken. He reached into his coat, not hurried, not dramatic, and pulled out his phone. For a second, nothing happened. Then, he made a call. No explanation. No introduction. Just a name. Bring them in, he said, and ended it. Derek frowned. Who exactly do you think you're calling? Khalid slipped the phone back into his pocket. You'll see. The confidence in his voice was unsettling. Not loud, not aggressive, but absolute. Rachel watched the exchange, her breathing still uneven. Everything felt like it was moving too fast, and not fast enough at the same time. I didn't do this, she said again, more quietly now. Khalid looked at her. I know. The certainty in those two words hit harder than anything else that had happened. Rachel blinked. You don't know me, she said. No, Khalid replied. But I know what I saw. Derek scoffed. What you saw was someone getting caught. Khalid turned to him. What I saw, he said evenly, was someone who didn't react like a thief. Derek crossed his arms. And what does that look like? Khalid didn't hesitate. Not like that. The simplicity of it only made it sharper. Derek's jaw tightened. Before he could respond, a sudden noise broke through the tension. The front door. Opening. All eyes turned. 3 people stepped inside, 2 men in dark suits, and a woman carrying a tablet. They didn't hesitate, didn't ask questions. They walked straight toward Khalid. Sir, one of the men said, giving a slight nod. Derek's expression shifted. What is this? He demanded. Khalid gestured toward the office. Let's make this efficient. The tone wasn't a suggestion. Derek hesitated for a fraction of a second, then forced a smile. I'm not letting strangers walk into my office. Khalid met his gaze. They're not strangers, he said. Not to me. The implication landed. Hard. Derek swallowed. Rachel felt it too. That shift, the moment where control began to slip. Fine, Derek muttered, but this doesn't change anything. Khalid didn't respond. He simply turned and walked toward the office. The others followed. Rachel stayed where she was for a moment, unsure what to do. Then Sophie's small hand slipped into hers. Mom, are you in trouble? She whispered. Rachel knelt quickly, brushing a strand of hair from Sophie's face. No, she said softly. It's just a misunderstanding. Sophie looked unconvinced. But they said, I know, Rachel interrupted gently. But sometimes people say things that aren't true. Sophie nodded slowly. Rachel stood again, her eyes drawn back toward the office. Whatever was happening in there, it wasn't over. Not even close. Inside, the tension had sharpened. Derek stood behind his desk now, his posture rigid as Khalid's team began setting up. This is unnecessary, Derek said. I already told you the cameras weren't working. The woman with the tablet didn't look up. They're always working, she said calmly, even when people think they're not. Derek's eyes flickered, just for a second. Khalid noticed. Check everything, he said. The man nodded, moving toward the system panel in the corner. Derek stepped forward. You don't have permission to... You already gave it, Khalid said. Derek froze. No, I didn't. Khalid's gaze didn't waver. You let us in. Silence. The technician worked quickly, fingers moving across the controls with practiced ease. A few seconds passed. Then, "Got it," he said. Derek's face drained slightly. "That's not possible," he muttered. The screen flickered to life. Footage began to play. Timestamps, angles, movement. Everyone in the office watched. Rachel stood just outside the door now, her heart pounding as she caught glimpses of the screen. The register, the kitchen, the hallway. Normal. Routine. Until the timestamp shifted, late after closing. A figure appeared, moving carefully, deliberately. Derek stepped closer to the screen, too quickly. "Stop it," he said. No one listened. The footage continued. The figure approached the register, opened it, removed the money. Rachel's breath caught. "That's..." The figure turned slightly, not enough to fully show their face, but enough. Enough to recognize the suit, the posture, the movement, Derek's movement. The room went silent. Completely. Derek stepped back. "That's not me," he said immediately. But his voice, it wasn't steady anymore. "It looks like you," Khalid said. "It's not," Derek snapped. "This is manipulated." The technician shook his head. "Raw feed," he said. "No edits." Derek's eyes darted around the room, searching, calculating, losing ground. "Even if that's true," he said quickly, "it doesn't prove anything about the money in her bag." Khalid didn't respond right away. He simply looked at him. Then, "Keep playing." The footage continued. The same figure, moving from the register, down the hallway, toward the lockers. Rachel's stomach dropped. "No," she whispered. The figure stopped at her locker, opened it, placed something inside, closed it, and walked away. The screen froze. The evidence hung in the air. Unavoidable. Unarguable. The room felt smaller now, tighter, like there was no space left for lies. Rachel covered her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. "I told you," she whispered. "I told you I didn't do it." Khalid looked at her, then back at Derek, and for the first time, there was no calm left in his gaze, only certainty. "Now," he said quietly, "we deal with the truth." Outside the office, the staff had gathered, watching, waiting, and when the door opened, everything was about to change, because the lie had been exposed, and there was no going back. The office door opened slowly. No one rushed out. No one spoke. But the moment Khalid stepped into the hallway, everything shifted. The staff fell silent. Every pair of eyes moved from him to Derek and back again. Because even before a single word was said, they could feel it. Something had changed. Rachel stood near the doorway, Sophie's hand still wrapped tightly in hers. Her chest rose and fell unevenly, the weight of everything pressing down at once. Khalid paused just long enough to let the silence settle. Then, "It wasn't her." 3 words, simple, final, and impossible to ignore. A ripple moved through the room. Confusion, relief, shock. Derek stepped out behind him quickly, his voice cutting through the moment. "This isn't over," he said sharply. "You don't get to make that decision." Khalid didn't turn immediately. When he did, his expression was colder than before. "I don't make decisions without facts," he said. Derek scoffed. "You think a grainy video proves anything?" "It proves enough," Khalid replied. The staff exchanged glances, because they had seen it too. Not clearly, not perfectly, but enough to understand. Derek's composure began to crack. "You're making a mistake," he said, his voice tightening. "You don't know how this place works." Khalid stepped closer. "I know exactly how it works," he said quietly. The tension between them was no longer subtle. It was direct, personal, and dangerous. Rachel watched, her heart still racing, her mind struggling to keep up. She had been accused, humiliated, almost destroyed. And now, just like that, the truth was shifting. But something about it didn't feel finished. Not yet. Because Khalid wasn't done. "Check the rest," he said, turning back toward the office. Derek's head snapped up. "There's nothing else to check." Khalid didn't stop walking. "Then you have nothing to worry about." The words echoed. Cold. Precise. Inside the office, the screen still glowed faintly, paused on the image of the locker. The technician glanced at Khalid. "You want the rest of the timeline?" "Yes." Derek stepped forward again. "I said that's enough." No one moved. No one listened. The footage resumed. Minutes ticked by on the screen. Movements, angles, nothing out of place. Until... "Wait," the woman with the tablet said. She tapped the screen, zoomed in, a different frame, earlier, before closing. Rachel leaned closer from the doorway. "What is that?" she asked. The woman adjusted the playback, rewound, slowed it down. The footage showed the dining room, crowded, busy, people moving in every direction. Then, a brief moment, almost invisible. Someone slipped behind the counter. Not Derek this time. Someone else, wearing a suit, moving quickly, carefully. Rachel frowned. "I didn't see that person," she said. "Most people wouldn't," the technician replied. The figure reached toward a drawer, pulled something out. Not money, a small envelope. The camera angle shifted slightly, and for just a fraction of a second, a mark became visible. On the envelope. A seal. Khalid stepped closer to the screen. His eyes narrowed. "Pause it." The image froze. The seal was partially obscured, but still recognizable. At least to him. Because he had seen it before, many times. On documents, on letters, on things that were never meant to be lost. "Enhance that," he said. The technician adjusted the image, cleared it, focused it, and then it became visible, clear, undeniable. A crest, elegant, precise, and unmistakable. The symbol of the Al-Najjar family. The room went silent again. But this time, it wasn't confusion. It was something else. Something deeper. Rachel felt it immediately. "What does that mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Khalid didn't answer right away, because he was still staring at the screen, still trying to process what he was seeing. "That's not possible," he said quietly. Derek seized the moment. "What are you talking about?" he demanded. Khalid turned slowly. "That envelope," he said. "Where did it go?" Derek blinked. "I don't know what you—" "Don't lie." The sharpness in Khalid's voice cut through everything. Derek flinched. Just slightly, but enough. "I don't know," Derek repeated, his tone less certain now. Khalid studied him, then looked back at the screen. The timeline moved forward again. The figure disappeared into the hallway, the same hallway that led to the lockers. And eventually, to Rachel's bag. Rachel's breath caught. That was before, she said. Yes, the technician confirmed. Before the money was taken. Khalid's mind moved quickly now. Pieces, connections, things that didn't make sense before, starting to align. This wasn't just about the money, he said. Rachel looked at him. What do you mean? Khalid gestured toward the screen. That envelope was the target, he said. The money was the distraction. The realization hit the room all at once. Derek shook his head. That's ridiculous. Is it? Khalid asked. Derek opened his mouth. But no words came, because even he could see it. The timing, the sequence, the intention. Rachel stepped closer, her heart pounding again. What was in that envelope? She asked. Khalid didn't answer immediately, because he wasn't sure. Not yet. But he had a feeling, a dangerous one. That's what we're going to find out, he said. Rachel swallowed. And if it has something to do with my mom? Khalid met her gaze, then nodded once. Then this is bigger than any of us thought. The weight of that settled in. Heavy. Unavoidable. Because what had started as an accusation, a simple lie, had just become something else entirely. A hidden past. A missing truth. A connection that someone had tried very hard to keep buried. And now, it was beginning to surface. The question was no longer who stole the money. It was, what were they trying to hide? No one moved for a long moment. The screen still glowed with the frozen image of the envelope, its seal now unmistakable. Rachel felt her pulse in her throat. That symbol, she whispered. What is it? Khalid didn't answer immediately. Because he wasn't just looking at the symbol. He was remembering it. The exact curve of the crest, the way the lines folded into each other, the mark his family had used for generations, on contracts, on private letters, on things that were never meant to leave their control. That, he said finally, his voice low, belongs to my family. The words landed heavily. Rachel blinked. Your family? Yes. Silence followed. Then, that doesn't make any sense, Rachel said, shaking her head. Why would something like that be here? Khalid didn't look away from the screen. That's what we're going to find out. Behind him, Derek let out a strained laugh. You're reaching, he said. You're turning a simple situation into something it's not. Khalid turned slowly. A simple situation? He repeated. Derek nodded quickly. Money goes missing. Someone gets blamed. It happens. Khalid's eyes hardened. And a sealed document tied to my family just happens to appear in the middle of it. Derek's mouth opened, then closed. Because he didn't have an answer. No one did. Rewind it, Khalid said. The technician obeyed. The footage rolled back to the moment the figure had taken the envelope. Freeze it again, Khalid added. The image sharpened. Closer now. Clearer. Rachel stepped forward, drawn in despite herself. That envelope, she said slowly. I've seen something like it before. Khalid looked at her. Where? Rachel hesitated. Then, in my mom's things. The room shifted. Khalid's attention sharpened instantly. You're sure? Rachel nodded slowly. I didn't understand it at the time, she said. It was old, hidden, like she didn't want anyone to find it. Her voice softened. But I remember the seal. I always thought it was just decoration. Khalid shook his head. No, he said. That's not decoration. Rachel swallowed. Then what is it? Khalid's jaw tightened. It's a signature. The word hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Derek shifted uncomfortably. Even if that's true, it still doesn't explain anything. Khalid ignored him. Do you still have it? He asked Rachel. Rachel hesitated again. I don't know, she admitted. After my mom passed, I didn't go through everything. Some of her things are still in storage. Khalid nodded once. We'll need to see it. Rachel looked at him carefully now. Not just as a stranger, not just as the man who had defended her, but as someone who might be connected to something far deeper than she had ever imagined. Why? She asked. Khalid held her gaze. Because if that envelope matches the one in this footage. He paused, then finished the thought. Then this isn't just about a recipe. Rachel felt a chill run through her. Then what is it about? Khalid didn't answer right away, because he wasn't certain yet. But he had a suspicion. A dangerous one. Keep playing, he said. The footage resumed. The figure disappeared down the hallway. Seconds later, the same figure reappeared. But this time, empty-handed. Rachel frowned. So they took it, she said. Yes, the technician confirmed. But why leave the money? Rachel asked. Khalid's expression darkened. They didn't leave it, he said. They used it. Rachel blinked. Used it? To distract us, Khalid said. To make us focus on the wrong thing. The realization settled in. Heavy. Unavoidable. Rachel's voice dropped. So, someone wanted that envelope gone? Yes. And they framed me to make sure no one would look deeper. Khalid nodded. That's exactly what they did. Rachel's hands trembled slightly. Why me? She asked. Khalid studied her for a long moment. Then, because you're connected to it. Rachel's breath caught. But I didn't even know it existed. That doesn't matter, Khalid said. Someone else did. Derek stepped forward again, more desperate now. This is insane, he said. You're building a story out of nothing. Khalid turned to him. No, he said calmly. I'm uncovering one. Derek's composure slipped further. You don't know what you're dealing with. Khalid's gaze didn't waver. Neither do you. The tension snapped tight. Then, Rachel spoke again. That notebook, she said suddenly. Khalid looked at her. What about it? Rachel swallowed. My mom's recipe book. It's not just recipes. Khalid's expression sharpened. What do you mean? Rachel hesitated, her thoughts racing. There are notes, she said. Things written in the margins. Things that don't make sense. Like what? Rachel closed her eyes briefly, trying to remember. Dates, she said. Names and something at the back. Khalid leaned forward slightly. What? Rachel opened her eyes. A message, she said. The room seemed to still again. What kind of message? Khalid asked. Rachel's voice was barely above a whisper now. I never understood it, she said, but it always stood out. Khalid waited. Rachel took a breath, then repeated the words exactly as she remembered them. For the child who will one day feed my son. The air left the room. Khalid didn't move, didn't blink. Because those words, they weren't unfamiliar, not entirely. He had heard something like them before, long ago, in a place he had tried to forget. Rachel watched his reaction carefully. You've heard that before, she said. It wasn't a question. Khalid exhaled slowly. Yes. Rachel's heart raced. What does it mean? Khalid looked at her. Really looked at her. As if seeing her differently now. Not just as Rachel Monroe, but as something else. Something tied to a past that had been carefully hidden. It means, he said quietly, this was planned. Rachel shook her head. No, she said. That doesn't make sense. Khalid didn't argue, because deep down, he knew it did. My mother didn't do things without reason, he said. If she wrote that... He paused, then finished. Then she intended for this to happen. Rachel's chest tightened. You're saying she chose us? Khalid didn't answer right away, because the truth was far more complicated than that, and far more dangerous. But one thing was clear. This wasn't coincidence. It wasn't luck. It wasn't chance. It was something else entirely. Something that had been set in motion years ago. Something that someone had tried to erase. And now, it was coming back. The question was no longer what had happened. It was, why had it been hidden? The air in the office had turned sharp. Not loud, not chaotic, but tight. Like something invisible had pulled every thread too far, and now nothing could return to where it once was. Rachel stood near the doorway, her hand still resting protectively against Sophie's shoulder. Her eyes hadn't left Khalid since he spoke those words. This was planned. She didn't know what frightened her more. The idea that her life had been shaped by something she never understood, or the fact that the man standing in front of her might be part of it. Derek was the first to break the silence. This is ridiculous, he said, louder now, his voice edged with panic he could no longer hide. You're turning a simple theft into some kind of conspiracy. Khalid didn't react immediately. He let the words settle. Let Derek keep talking. Because men like Derek always revealed more when they thought they were still in control. There was no envelope, Derek continued quickly. No plan, just a mistake that got out of hand. Khalid finally turned his head. A mistake? He repeated. Yes, Derek said. And you're making it worse by dragging in things that don't belong here. Khalid stepped closer. Everything belongs here now. The quiet certainty in his voice landed harder than any accusation. Derek swallowed. You don't even know who I am, he said, trying to recover. Khalid's expression didn't change. I do. The room stilled again, because something in the way he said it was different, more direct, more final. Derek frowned. Then say it. Khalid held his gaze. You're the man who thought no one would question you. Derek scoffed. That's not an answer. No, Khalid said. It's a description. The tension snapped tighter. Rachel watched, her breath shallow. She had never seen Derek like this. Not confident, not controlled, but cornered. You don't have any authority here, Derek said again, his voice rising. You're just a customer. For the first time, Khalid smiled. Not warmly, not kindly, but knowingly. That's where you're wrong. He reached into his coat again, this time not for a phone, but for something else. A small, folded document. He placed it on the desk, carefully, deliberately. Derek glanced at it, then back at Khalid. What is that? Your answer. Derek hesitated, then stepped forward, unfolded it. His eyes moved quickly across the page. And then, they stopped. His face changed. Color drained. His grip tightened slightly on the paper. This, he began, but couldn't finish. Rachel leaned closer, her heart pounding. "What is it?" she asked. Khalid didn't look at Derek. He looked at her. "It's the ownership transfer." Rachel blinked. "The what?" "The building," Khalid said. "The land, the business operating inside it." He paused, then added, "All of it." The words hit the room like a shockwave. Rachel stared at him. "You own this place?" Khalid nodded once. "As of this morning." Silence. Complete. Total. Derek shook his head, stepping back. "That's not possible," he said. "This deal, this was months away." Khalid tilted his head slightly. "It was," he agreed, "until I decided not to wait." Derek's voice dropped. "You can't just—" "I can," Khalid interrupted calmly. "And I did." The truth settled in. Heavy. Unavoidable. Rachel felt the ground shift beneath her again. The man who had sat quietly in the corner, the man who had defended her, the man who had followed her into an alley, wasn't just a customer. He was everything Derek had built his power on. Everything Derek thought he controlled now belonged to him. Derek's breathing became uneven. "This doesn't change anything," he said quickly. "You can't just walk in and rewrite everything." Khalid stepped closer. "I'm not rewriting anything," he said. "I'm correcting it." Derek's eyes flickered toward the door, toward the staff, toward Rachel, looking for support. Finding none. "You don't understand how things work here," he said, weaker now. Khalid's gaze hardened. "No," he said. "You don't." The shift was complete. The power dynamic. Gone. Replaced. Rachel felt it in every breath, every glance, every silence. Khalid turned slightly, addressing the room now. "Effective immediately," he said, his voice steady, controlled, undeniable. "Rachel Monroe is not to be dismissed, questioned, or removed from her position." Rachel blinked. "What?" Khalid continued. "And any actions taken against her based on false accusations are to be considered void." The staff exchanged stunned looks. Derek shook his head again, more frantic now. "You can't do that without an investigation." Khalid looked at him. "I already did." Derek's voice cracked slightly. "You're making a mistake." Khalid didn't respond, because he knew he wasn't. Rachel stepped forward slowly. "This doesn't make sense," she said. "Why are you doing this?" Khalid turned to her. For a moment, everything else faded. The room, the staff, Derek, all of it. "What happened to you last night shouldn't have happened," he said. Rachel shook her head. "That's not what I mean." Her voice tightened. "You don't know me." Khalid held her gaze. "No," he said. "But I know what's right." Rachel studied him, searching, trying to understand. And then she said it, quietly, but clearly. "My mother told me something once." Khalid didn't interrupt. "She said," Rachel hesitated, her voice trembling just slightly now, "if anyone from your family ever came looking—" The room seemed to hold its breath. "I shouldn't trust them." The words landed harder than anything else that had been said. Khalid didn't move, didn't react immediately. But something inside him shifted, because that wasn't something he had expected. Rachel met his gaze. Fully now. No hesitation. No fear. Just truth. "So tell me," she said softly. "Why should I trust you?" The question hung in the air, heavy, unavoidable. And for the first time since he walked into that restaurant, Khalid al-Najjar didn't have an immediate answer. The question didn't echo. It didn't need to. It stayed where Rachel left it. Between them. Heavy, quiet, impossible to ignore. Why should I trust you? Khalid felt it settle into him in a way no accusation ever had. Because this wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It was something far more difficult to answer. Truth. He exhaled slowly. You shouldn't, he said. Rachel blinked. The answer wasn't what she expected. Not defensive, not persuasive, just honest. I don't expect you to, Khalid continued. Not yet. The room remained still, every person holding on to the moment like it might shift again at any second. Rachel studied him, searching for something hidden behind his words. But there was nothing there. No manipulation. No urgency. Just a quiet acceptance. Then why are you helping me? She asked. Khalid's gaze flickered for the briefest second. Not away from her, but inward. Because the answer wasn't simple. It started with the food, he said. Rachel frowned slightly. That's not enough. No, Khalid agreed. It isn't. He took a step back, giving her space, as if understanding that this wasn't something he could force. But it led to something else. Rachel didn't respond. So he continued. Something that shouldn't have been hidden. Rachel's chest tightened. You mean the envelope? Yes. And the money that never came? Khalid nodded once. Rachel's voice dropped. You said your mother helped people, she said. Then why didn't she help mine? The question cut deeper than anything else. Because it wasn't about the past. It was about responsibility. Khalid didn't answer right away. Because for the first time, he wasn't sure his version of the truth was complete. Before he could speak, a voice came from behind Rachel. You want the real answer? Leonard Hayes stepped into the doorway. No one had noticed him enter. But now that he was there, everything changed again. Rachel turned quickly. Mr. Hayes? Leonard nodded slightly, then looked at Khalid. This is where it stops being simple. Khalid's expression tightened. Then explain it. Leonard stepped further into the room, his movements slower now, more deliberate. I told you before, he said. Your mother tried to help. Rachel leaned forward slightly. Tried? Leonard nodded. Leonard, she did more than try, he said. She arranged everything. The money, the documents, the support your family needed. Rachel's breath caught. Then why didn't we get it? Leonard's eyes shifted. Not to Rachel, but to Khalid. Because it never left his family. Silence. The kind that presses in, that forces truth into the open whether you're ready or not. Khalid's jaw tightened. That's not possible, he said. If she arranged it, and she did, Leonard interrupted, but she wasn't the only one making decisions. Rachel felt the shift immediately. What does that mean? Leonard didn't soften it. It means your help was stopped. By who? Rachel asked. Leonard held her gaze. By the man who controlled everything back then. Khalid's voice dropped. My father. Leonard didn't answer. He didn't need to. Rachel felt something inside her collapse. No, she whispered. Khalid's chest tightened. My father wouldn't have. He would, Leonard said firmly. And he did. The truth landed hard. Unavoidable. Unforgiving. Rachel stepped back slightly, shaking her head. You're saying... She struggled to finish the thought. My mom didn't get help because his family chose not to? Leonard nodded. Yes. Rachel turned slowly toward Khalid. Her eyes weren't confused anymore. They were clear, sharp, hurt. "All this time," she said quietly, "we thought we were forgotten." Khalid didn't move. "Instead," she continued, her voice tightening, "we were ignored." Khalid swallowed. "It wasn't her decision," he said. "My mother, she wouldn't have—" "She didn't," Leonard said. "That's the point." Rachel's voice rose slightly. "Then why didn't she fix it?" Leonard hesitated. For the first time, then, "Because she couldn't." Rachel froze. "What do you mean?" Leonard looked at Khalid again. "She lost control," he said. "Of the money, of the decisions, of everything." Khalid's breathing slowed, because he knew what that meant, what that implied. "When?" he asked. Leonard didn't answer right away. Then, finally, not long before she died. The room shifted again, heavier now, more final. Rachel's hands trembled. "So she tried to help us," she said slowly. "Yes. And someone stopped her." Leonard nodded. "Yes." Rachel's gaze locked onto Khalid. "And that someone was your father." Khalid didn't deny it. He couldn't. Because everything Leonard had said fit too well. His father's control, his decisions, the way nothing moved without his approval, and the way his mother had changed in those final years. Quieter, more distant. Rachel's voice dropped again. "So everything that happened to my family," she took a breath, "was because of yours." The words didn't sound angry. That would have been easier. They sounded certain, and that made them harder to carry. Khalid felt it settle into him. Heavy. Real. "I didn't know," he said. Rachel nodded slowly. "I believe you," she said, then added, "But that doesn't change anything." The truth cut clean. No room for defense. No room for excuses. Just consequence. Khalid didn't argue, because she was right. Rachel looked down at Sophie, who had stayed quiet through everything, her small hand still gripping her mother's sleeve. "Come on," Rachel said softly. Sophie looked up at her. "Are we leaving?" Rachel hesitated, just for a second, then nodded. "Yes." She turned back to Khalid one last time. "There's more to this," she said. "And you know it." Khalid met her gaze. "I do." Rachel took a step back. "Then find it," she said, her voice steady now, stronger. "Because I'm done being part of a story I never agreed to." She turned and walked out. Sophie right beside her. The room stayed silent long after the door closed. Khalid didn't move, didn't speak. Because for the first time, this wasn't about curiosity, or coincidence, or even truth. It was about responsibility, and the weight of something his family had done that he could no longer ignore. The question wasn't whether he would uncover the rest. It was, what would it cost him when he did? The restaurant didn't recover overnight. Even after the truth surfaced, even after the accusations were overturned, something had changed inside Mason's table. It wasn't just the silence that lingered longer than usual. It was the awareness, the quiet realization that something deeper had been hiding beneath everyday routines, beneath familiar faces and repeated patterns. And now that it had been exposed, nothing felt the same. Derek Holloway didn't return the next morning, or the next. At first, no one asked questions out loud, but everyone knew. They had seen the footage, heard the truth, watched the power shift. And people like Derek didn't stay when the ground beneath them disappeared. By the third day, an official notice appeared at the entrance. Management under review. Operations temporarily overseen by new ownership. The words were simple, but the message was clear. Everything was changing. Inside the kitchen, Rachel stood in the same spot she always had. Same counter, same stove, same pot simmering gently in front of her. But she didn't feel the same. Her movements were slower now, more deliberate. Not because she was tired, but because she was thinking. About everything. About her mother. About the years they struggled. About the truth that had been hidden from them. And about the man who now stood at the center of it all. Khalid al-Najjar. She hadn't seen him since that day. Not in person. But she knew he hadn't disappeared. People like him didn't just walk away, especially not after something like this. Rachel? She turned. One of the staff members stood near the doorway, holding a clipboard. There's someone here to see you. Rachel's chest tightened slightly. Who? The staff member hesitated. Then, the owner. Rachel didn't respond right away. She just stood there, staring at the pot in front of her, as if the answer might rise from it. Then, okay, she said quietly. She wiped her hands, took a breath, and walked out. The dining room was empty this time. No crowd, no whispers, no judgment, just one man sitting at the same table as before. Khalid. He stood when he saw her, not out of formality, but something else. Respect. Rachel noticed, but she didn't react. Hi, he said. Rachel nodded once. Hi. The silence between them felt different now. Not tense, not hostile, just careful. I didn't come to interrupt your work, Khalid said. I just wanted to talk, Rachel finished. Khalid nodded. Yes. Rachel pulled out the chair across from him. Sat, but didn't relax. I've been going through the records, Khalid said. Rachel didn't respond. She waited, because she knew this wasn't small talk. Everything Leonard said, Khalid continued. It's true. Rachel's jaw tightened slightly. I figured. Khalid nodded. There were transfers, documents, contracts, all prepared. Rachel's voice stayed calm. But they never reached us. No, Khalid said. They didn't. Rachel looked at him. And your father stopped it. Khalid didn't hesitate this time. Yes. The honesty mattered, even if it hurt. Rachel leaned back slightly. And now? Khalid exhaled slowly. Now I fix it. Rachel's expression didn't change. You can't fix years of struggle with money. I know, Khalid said. Then what are you trying to do? Khalid reached into his coat, carefully, not rushed, not dramatic, and placed something on the table. An envelope. Rachel's eyes dropped to it. The seal. The same one. Her fingers tightened slightly. What is this? The original transfer, Khalid said. Reconstructed. Adjusted for everything that was lost. Rachel didn't touch it. I don't want charity, she said. It's not charity. Rachel looked at him. It feels like it. Khalid shook his head. No, he said. It's not something I'm giving you. He paused, then added, It's something that was always yours. The distinction mattered. But Rachel didn't reach for it. Not yet. I survived without it, she said. I know. And I can keep going without it. I know that too. Rachel studied him, trying to understand. "You don't have to prove anything," she said. Khalid met her gaze. "I'm not proving anything," he said. "Then what are you doing?" Khalid didn't answer immediately, because the truth wasn't simple. "I'm taking responsibility," he said finally. Rachel looked away for a moment, processing, feeling. Then, "That's your responsibility," she said. "Not mine." Khalid nodded. "I agree." Rachel looked back at him. "So don't make it mine." Silence. Khalid understood what she meant. This wasn't about accepting money or rejecting it. It was about control, choice, dignity. He pushed the envelope slightly closer. "Then don't think of it as something you owe me," he said. Rachel's eyes narrowed slightly. "What should I think of it as?" Khalid held her gaze. "A chance." Rachel didn't respond, so he continued. "A chance to decide what happens next. On your terms." The words landed differently, because they weren't about the past. They were about the future. Rachel looked at the envelope again. Still didn't touch it, but didn't push it away either. Behind her, the staff had gathered quietly, not intruding, just watching. Because they knew this mattered, not just for Rachel, but for everything that came after. Rachel finally spoke again. "You said everything is changing," she said. Khalid nodded. "Yes." Rachel leaned forward slightly. "Then let's make one thing clear." Khalid listened. "This place," she said, gesturing around them, "doesn't need saving." Khalid's expression remained steady. "I know." "It needs fairness," Rachel continued. "Respect. People being treated like they matter." Khalid nodded again. "That's exactly what it's going to get." Rachel studied him for a long moment. Then, "Good." She stood. Khalid did the same. Rachel picked up the envelope, held it, not tightly, but firmly. "I'll think about it," she said. Khalid nodded. "That's all I ask." Rachel turned, but before she walked away, she stopped. "And Khalid?" He looked at her. "This doesn't fix everything," she said. "I know." Rachel nodded once, then walked back toward the kitchen, the envelope still in her hand. The room stayed quiet after she left, because everyone understood. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something else, something uncertain, but real, and for the first time in a long time, the truth wasn't buried anymore. The question now was, what would they build on top of it? Change didn't arrive all at once. It didn't sweep through Mason's table in a single dramatic moment or erase the past overnight. It came slowly, quietly, in small, deliberate choices. And for the first time since anyone could remember, those choices were made differently. The sign outside was repaired first, not replaced, just fixed. The same name remained, but the flicker was gone. The light was steady now, casting a warm glow onto the sidewalk that felt more like an invitation than a warning. Inside, the tables were polished, the walls repainted, the kitchen reorganized. But nothing felt artificial. Nothing felt like it had been erased. Because Rachel had insisted on one thing from the very beginning. "We're not starting over," she had said. "We're building on what's already here." Khalid had agreed, without hesitation. Now, weeks later, the result was visible in every corner of the restaurant. Not luxury, not excess, but care. Real care. Rachel stood in the kitchen, her sleeves rolled up, her focus steady as she checked the seasoning on a simmering pot. Around her, The staff moved with more confidence than before. They weren't afraid anymore. Not of Derek. Not of being overlooked. Not of speaking up. "Chef?" one of the cooks called. Rachel turned. There was still a part of her that wasn't used to that word. Chef. It didn't feel like a title. It felt like responsibility. "Yes?" "The supplier called. They want to confirm the new order schedule." Rachel nodded. "Tell them we'll stick with what we agreed. Fresh deliveries every morning." "Got it." The cook moved quickly, no hesitation. Rachel watched for a moment, then turned back to the stove. It was different now. Not just the kitchen. Everything. Out front, Sophie sat at one of the corner tables, a book open in front of her. She wasn't alone this time. 2 other children, sons of one of the servers, sat with her, whispering and laughing softly as they worked through their homework together. Rachel glanced at them through the small window in the kitchen door, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to smile. Later that afternoon, the doors opened again. Khalid stepped inside. No one rushed to greet him. No one whispered. Because he wasn't a stranger anymore. He was part of the place now. Not because he owned it, but because he had chosen to change with it. He walked slowly toward the kitchen, stopping briefly to acknowledge a few staff members along the way. Not with authority, with respect. When he reached the doorway, he paused. Rachel noticed him almost immediately. "You're early," she said, not looking up. Khalid leaned lightly against the frame. "I had time." Rachel stirred the pot once more before setting the spoon aside. "Everything's running fine," she said. "You don't need to check in every day." "I know," Khalid replied. Rachel turned to face him. "Then why do you?" Khalid considered the question, because the truth wasn't simple. "I like seeing it," he said. "Seeing what?" "This," he gestured lightly around the kitchen. "What it's become." Rachel held his gaze. "It was always here," she said. "People just didn't notice." Khalid nodded. "That's true." Silence settled between them for a moment. But it wasn't uncomfortable. It was balanced. "You've changed things," Rachel said. Khalid shook his head slightly. "No," he said. "You did." Rachel didn't respond right away, because part of her still resisted that idea, still didn't fully accept it. But another part, the part that had fought through everything, knew it was true. Out front, the door opened again. This time, a larger group entered. Dressed well, curious. New customers, the kind who had started hearing about the place again. Word had spread. Not just about the food, but about the story. And stories, they traveled fast. One of the servers approached Rachel. "We've got a full house tonight." Rachel nodded. "Good." The server hesitated. "Do you want to say something before we open?" Rachel frowned slightly. "Like what?" The server glanced toward the dining room. "People are here because of you." Rachel looked past him, at the tables, at the faces, at the expectation. For a moment, she felt that old pressure rise again. The weight of being seen, of being judged. But this time, it felt different. She wiped her hands slowly, then stepped out into the dining room. The conversation softened as people noticed her, not silent, but quieter, more attentive. Rachel didn't rush, didn't perform. She just stood there, present. "Thank you for being here," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. "This place hasn't changed because of money," she continued. It's changed because people chose to treat each other differently. A few heads nodded. Rachel's eyes moved across the room. "We're not perfect," she said. "But we're honest. And we care about what we do." She paused, then added, "That's all we've ever tried to be." The room stayed quiet for a second. Then, applause. Not overwhelming. Not forced. But real. Rachel nodded once, then turned and walked back into the kitchen. Khalid watched her go, and for the first time in a long time, he felt something settle inside him. Not guilt, not regret, but something else. Peace. Later that night, after the last table had cleared and the doors were closed, the staff gathered near the front. Not for work, not for orders, but for something simple. A moment. Rachel stood beside them. Sophie leaned against her side, half asleep, but smiling. Khalid stood a little apart, watching, not as an outsider, but not fully inside either. Rachel looked around, at everyone, then back at Khalid. "You ready?" she asked. Khalid nodded. Rachel stepped forward and reached for the new sign. It hadn't been revealed yet, covered until now. She pulled the cloth away slowly. The name appeared beneath it. Simple, clean, and meaningful. Not just one name, but two, a quiet tribute, a shared history, a new beginning. The room fell silent again. But this time, it wasn't tension, it was understanding. Because everyone there knew. This wasn't just a restaurant anymore. It was something more. The question was no longer what had been lost. It was, what would they carry forward from here? The cloth slipped free in Rachel's hands. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the new name came into full view. Clean lettering against dark wood, simple and steady. Evelyn and Amira's table. A quiet tribute. Two mothers, two stories that had once run parallel, never meant to meet. And yet somehow, inevitably, they had. A soft murmur moved through the room. Not confusion, recognition. Because even those who didn't know the full story could feel the meaning behind it. Rachel's grip on the edge of the sign loosened slightly. For a moment, she just stood there, taking it in. Her mother's name. Not hidden, not forgotten. Carried forward. Beside the woman who had tried to help them, and almost succeeded. Khalid watched from the few steps back, his expression calm, but his eyes sharper than before. He hadn't suggested the name. Rachel had. And that mattered, because this wasn't about rewriting the past. It was about acknowledging it, fully, honestly, without erasing what came before. "Open the doors," Rachel said quietly. One of the staff nodded and moved immediately, unlocking the front entrance. The city night spilled in. Cool air, distant noise, the hum of life continuing beyond their walls. But inside, something had settled. The first guests stepped in slowly, their eyes drawn to the new sign. A few paused, read it again, and then walked forward, not with hesitation, but with curiosity. Rachel returned to the kitchen, back to the place she had always belonged. But this time, she didn't disappear behind it. She moved with purpose, with presence. The staff followed her lead. Orders were taken, dishes prepared, conversations flowed, and through it all, the same scent filled the air. Warm, familiar, unchanged. Except now, people knew where it came from. At the corner table, Khalid sat quietly, the same place he had chosen on the very first day. No one rushed to serve him. No one hovered, because they didn't need to. Rachel stepped out a few minutes later, carrying a single bowl. She placed it in front of him without a word. The soup. He looked up. Their eyes met. No tension, no questions, just understanding. Khalid picked up the spoon, paused, then took a slow, deliberate bite. This time, the memory didn't pull him backward. It didn't drag him into the past. It stayed present, grounded, because now he understood where it came from and what it meant. He set the spoon down gently. "It's still the same," he said. Rachel gave a small nod. "It always was?" Khalid studied her for a moment. "You changed everything," he said. Rachel shook her head. "No," she replied. "I just stopped letting other people decide what mattered." The words lingered, not as a statement, but as a truth. Across the room, Sophie sat at one of the tables, her feet barely touching the floor, her eyes bright as she watched everything unfold. She caught Rachel's eye. Smiled. Rachel smiled back. And in that small moment, everything that had been uncertain felt steady. Later that night, when the last guest had left and the lights dimmed, the staff gathered again. Not out of obligation, but because they wanted to. Rachel stood at the center this time, not because she needed to be, but because they expected it. She looked at each of them, the faces that had once been silent, afraid, overlooked, and now present. "I don't have a speech," she said. A few people smiled. Rachel exhaled softly. "I just want to say thank you." She paused, then added, "For staying." The words were simple, but they carried weight, because they knew what she meant. They had stayed through uncertainty, through change, through everything. And that mattered. Khalid watched from the side, his hands loosely at his sides, his posture relaxed in a way it hadn't been before. He didn't step forward, didn't interrupt. Because this moment wasn't his, it belonged to them. Rachel looked toward him briefly, then back to the group. "This place isn't about what we lost," she said. "It's about what we choose to build." Silence followed. But it wasn't empty. It was full. Of understanding. Of acceptance. Of something real. When the group finally broke apart, Rachel moved toward the front door, stepping outside for a moment. The night was quiet now, the city slower. Khalid joined her a moment later. They stood side by side, looking out at the street. "You could have named it anything," he said. Rachel nodded. "I know. Why that?" Rachel didn't hesitate. "Because both of them mattered," she said. Khalid's gaze softened slightly. "They did?" Rachel looked at him. "And now it's not just about them anymore." Khalid understood. It was about what came next. The future. The choices they would make from here. Rachel crossed her arms lightly, taking in a slow breath of the night air. "I'm not going to let this become something it's not," she said. Khalid nodded. "I wouldn't expect you to." Rachel glanced at him. "You're still going to be around, aren't you?" Khalid considered the question. Then, "Yes." Rachel gave a small, almost amused smile. "Good," she said. "Just don't try to run it." Khalid let out a quiet breath. I won't." They stood there a moment longer. No pressure, no expectations. Just space. And for the first time since everything began, that was enough. Inside, the lights dimmed further. The sign outside remained steady. No flicker, no uncertainty. Just a quiet glow in the dark, a reminder that something small, something overlooked, could become something meaningful if people chose to see it differently. And in the end, that choice was what changed everything. Kindness isn't loud, and it doesn't demand attention. But it always leaves a mark. When we stop judging people by what we see on the surface, we begin to understand who they truly are. And sometimes, the smallest act of care can change a life in ways no one expects. If this story moved you, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that might change the way you see the world.